Thank you, Brother Solin, for putting this on Zoom recording and on YouTube Live.
Yes, sir.
We're now going to be looking at a review of Unit 1, Lesson 10, entitled Poetry, Lesson 11, entitled Comprehension, and Lesson 12, Advertisement, in preparation for the final exam. We are reviewing Unit 1, Lesson 10, Poetry. Number 1, we have seen that poetry is a special kind of writing, speaking, and singing, which makes use of figurative language in order to communicate the author's knowledge and feelings on any topic. It's not a straightforward type of writing like prose, and use is made up of many different literary devices or writing styles to communicate the author's knowledge and feelings. I will be looking at that in more detail in number 3. So far as the Bible is concerned, there are books that are written in poetic style. And these books of poetry in the Bible are Job, Psalms, Ecclesiastes. You also have Proverbs, you have Song of Solomon, and Lamentations. Now let us look at some of the poetic styles that are found in the Bible. Styles of poetic expression are A, parallelism, and this is the use of synonyms in 2 or more lines of poetry, which express ideas that are like or similar to each other. Now, the word synonym refers to a word that has a similar or identical meaning to another word. And in the Old Testament, there is a lot of use of these words that are similar or identical in meaning. So parallelism is the use of synonyms in 2 or more lines of poetry, which express ideas that are like or similar to each other. For example, Psalm 34 verse 1 reads, and as I read it, notice the words in capital letters. These are the words that are synonyms. These are the words that are parallel, and I will point that out shortly. I will bless the Lord at all times. Now that is one line. The second line is, his praise shall continually be in my mouth. Bless is parallel in idea to praise, and at all times is parallel in idea to continually. This is the most common characteristic of Hebrew poetry, just as rhyme is the most common characteristic of English poetry. B, metaphor, is another literary device or writing style used in poetry. Metaphor is an implied comparison. For example, in Psalm 23 verse 1, it says, the Lord is my shepherd. It is implied that a comparison is being made between the characteristics of a shepherd and the characteristics of the Lord. Another literary device or another style of writing in poetry is called simile. Simile is an explicit or clearly stated comparison introduced by either the word as or the word like. For example, Psalm 78 verse 52 reads, but made his people go forth like sheep. This is the word that I'm talking about. It is simile, in which you use the word like to introduce the comparison. He made his people go forth like sheep. So the comparison is being made between God's people and a flock of sheep, and guided them in the wilderness like a flock. We also have parallelism in here. Sheep is parallel in idea to flock. God's people are being compared to a flock of sheep. Then there is the literary device or writing style known as personification. Personification is giving the characteristics of a person to impersonal things. Notice the use of the word person in personification. So there are non-living things that are not literally persons, but in poetry, they are described as doing certain things that we know persons do. For example, Psalm 93 verse 3 reads, "The floods have lifted up their voice." Now we know that the floods, whether it is a river or whether it is that heavy rains have flooded the roads or flooded land with water, we know that floods do not literally have voices. They don't have loud voices. They don't have voices that are soft. But in poetry, this can be expressed. The floods have lifted up their voice. The idea in the context of the Psalms is that the floods are giving praise to God. Psalm 98 verse 8 reads, "Let the floods clap their hands." And here again, we find that the floods do not literally have hands, but they are given the characteristics of a person. We know that persons normally have hands, which they can clap. So here we find that the floods are being personified. The floods clap their hands, and the idea is that they praise God with their voices and with the clapping of their hands. So, as I said already, the floods are not persons, but they're being described as if they were persons praising the Lord by lifting up their voice and by clapping their hands. So these are some styles of poetic expression. We're moving on now to lesson 11, entitled Comprehension. And in this lesson, we focused on the use of parables. A parable is a story. It is fictional, that is, it is made up, but it can still be true to life or realistic. And it is used to illustrate a spiritual truth or spiritual truths. The parable that we looked at in the most detail was the rich fool, found in Luke chapter 12, verses 15 through 21. The reason Jesus told this parable is that there was a man in the crowd who asked Jesus to tell his brother to divide the inheritance with him. The purpose of the parable is to teach the spiritual truth that material possessions are not equal to life, and that what is important is that we share our material possessions with others and not keep them only for our own selves. Now, in the parable itself, the story goes like this, that there was a man who was rich and his farm produced a lot of crops. He had so much to harvest that he didn't have enough space in his barns to hold the amount of crops. So he wondered what he would do, and he came up with a solution. He said he would tear down his barns and he would build bigger barns, and he would put all of his harvest into these barns. And then he would just take life easy for the rest of his life. He would not have to work hard anymore. He would just eat and drink and be merry. But that very night, he died. And so he did not live to enjoy the harvest that he had reaped. And Jesus asked the question, who shall enjoy this harvest that this man had reaped? Certainly not this man. He died without being able to take anything with him that he had harvested. He was selfish. He did not share what he had with others. And that is the point. Life is not equal to the many things that we may have. When we die, we will leave all these things behind. We cannot take anything with us. So what we need to do is to share what we have with others who are in need, and we will have riches laid up for ourselves in heaven, and God will reward us for our generosity and kindness to others. So here was a story to illustrate the need to be unselfish and to share what we have with others. Okay, and in comprehension, we ask questions to find out if people understand what they have read. What was the purpose of the parable? And what is the occasion why Jesus found the need to tell this parable? Questions like those we consider in comprehension. And now we are reviewing Unit 1, Lesson 12, Advertisement. First of all, we have a definition of advertisement. Advertisement is a notice or an announcement in a public media promoting a product, service, or an event, or publicizing a job vacancy. A public medium refers to the means by which people in general can read about or hear about this announcement. So it might be such as Television Jamaica, it might be Radio Jamaica, it might be the Jamaica Gleaner, the Jamaica Observer. It is a public medium so that people may know about a product, a service, or an event, or a job vacancy, for example. Now, in this lesson, I emphasize the need for the church to oppose sinful advertisement. Not every advertisement that we watch on television or listen to on radio is good advertisement. Sometimes business people advertise events or services that are not right in the sight of God. For example, in the past few years, there has been an increase, a great increase in the advertisement of witchcraft services. And also there has been the promotion of the legalization of same-sex relationships. And so what do we as a church do to help people to know that they should not follow these sinful advertisements? A, we need to teach and to preach against it in our congregations. B, we need to write letters to the editors of different newspapers about it. There are two ways we can go about writing letters to the editors. We can do so online. Different newspapers have the section in which you can type your letter to the editor, and it is reviewed and it is published online. Or we can write it ourselves or type it ourselves and mail it to the to the radio station or to the television station or to the newspaper place so that they can know what we think about their advertisements. C, we can also telephone the radio stations and speak against these advertisements on the talk shows. It costs no money except the telephone call. The radio station is a good way of reaching a lot of people because a lot of people still listen to the radio, perhaps even more than television. So we need to telephone the radio stations and speak against these advertisements on the talk shows that are held on these different radio stations. Or we need to email the media houses and try to persuade them to stop advertising these sinful behaviors. So there are different ways that we can oppose sinful advertisement. We may ask, what is the scriptural basis for doing this? Well, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5 and verses 13 through 16, ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its taste, how will it be made salty again? It is therefore good for nothing but to be thrown out and to be trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither doth a person light a lamp and put it under a basket, but put it on a lampstand, that it may give light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So we're being compared to salt and to light. Now, salt is used to enhance the flavor or the tastiness of food. It has a positive impact on the food, whether we put a little salt on an egg or a little salt on biscuits. It enhances the flavor of what we put it on. Well, we are to have a positive influence on people around us, whether it be individuals, whether it be governments, whether it be businesses. We are to have a positive impact on them. We are also compared to light, and light shows up what is hidden in the darkness. It exposes, it reveals. So we are to make people aware of certain practices that are wrong in the sight of God and encourage them not to practice those things. So that is a scriptural basis for opposing anything in society that is against the will of God, such as sinful advertisement. So it's just 3 lessons that you need to prepare for. Lesson number 10 on poetry, lesson 11 on comprehension, and lesson 12 on advertisement. You already have this PowerPoint review. Do you have any query or any question on what we have looked at?
No, sir.
Okay, then.
Okay.
All right, we will be stopping here, and I will begin Hebrew language at 10:30, God willing. Okay, I'll see you then.
Yes, sir.
All
Okay.
right. Okay.